So thank you first of all to Free Lives and Make Games SA for making this possible, making sure that this could happen. Yeah, happy to be here. I hope that this workshop, I hope that you'll find some type of value in it. I know that audio can be, I generally get the impression that in games audio is kind of relegated to the back. It's kind of, okay, cool, we've got our game, now let's put the audio in. But I think there's a lot that can be done with audio, and I think there's a lot of opportunities that you can really make and yeah, use for your games. One question before we get started: do we all at the moment have some type of DAW, either Reaper or Cubase or Pro Tools or something installed? If so, could you give a thumbs up? Yes, 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 yes.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Sorry, I'm not sure if the mic levels are good enough on this. Is the sound okay from here?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Wanted to ask something quickly. So a friend of mine
Yes.
was quite keen on joining the workshop as well. And I just wanted to get him to be sent the link directly. But he said he hasn't gotten it yet. Would you mind if I forward it to him if there's anyone who hasn't shown up or anything?
I don't think that's a problem, Adonai.
That's totally
Okay.
fine, yeah.
Okay.
I can quickly post the invite link for you, or is that something you can see already?
I think I was emailed it, so I can just forward it to him.
Cool, go for it. Let me know if you need help.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, not a problem. So I think we have a few new participants. Andrew, welcome. Do we have any other new joiners? Imran, you good? Bryn, is your audio okay for now?
Yeah, it's okay now. I just had to restart my computer for some reason.
Okay, super.
Technology.
Right, so Charlie, the question I was asking is, do we all have some type of DAW, either Pro Tools or Ableton Live or something installed? That's the main thing that we'll need. Groovy.
Yes? So like Reaper? Sorry, I don't know anything about. Is Reaper a version?
Not a problem. So Reaper, yes, Reaper is also a DAW. That was the one that I included in the link, which you're welcome to use. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I downloaded that one.
Okay, great. Right. So let's hop.
Quick question. When I use the DAW, the audio, like my audio just kind of like routes to the DAW, and I can really hear audio through the DAW, not anything else.
Yes, so
is it like a is like a setting I need to like enable or disable to hear sound from the meeting and the door?
Yes, good question. Great question. That's something that I found incredibly frustrating when I first started. So let me actually just hop over to Reaper and I'll just show you exactly what the setting is within Reaper. If you're using any other kind of DAW, I'm not so sure about Pro Tools. That might be a little bit more of an issue to work around. Sorry, why do we not have this full screen? Right, so essentially, under your preferences within either Reaper or within Cubase or Pro Tools, whichever DAW you're using, under your audio system, there will be a mode here. You'll see a number of different audio systems such as ASIO, Direct Sound, so on and so forth. So when we do open Reaper, we need to make sure that we are on Wasapi, and under mode, we're going to use shared mode. So essentially what that's going to do is allow a number of applications to share audio as opposed to your DAW taking over control of the audio and locking out any other applications.
Thanks, because I've also had that problem with Facebook and I never really figured out how to deal with it.
Yeah. No, it's definitely an issue you have to sort out at the beginning. So I think perhaps let me just give you, just so that we don't have chopping and changing later. I think if everyone could just get their copy of Reaper or whichever DAW you're working in open, and if you could navigate towards your audio system and get this on Wasapi and shared mode. If you could just do that now, I think that'll be easier for us to switch over later. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I might have a problem here because I'm using Linux and I don't have like the Wasabi mode, and I can't find like any other modes that would allow me to do shared audio. So I'll just join Zoom on my phone and just like use Reaper like with whatever default mode it gives me. If that's fine.
Okay. Okay,
Right?
super, no problem. Just join and then I'll admit you into the meeting as well.
Thanks. I'll stay like on my computer as well because it's easier to see the screen sharing here. So there will be like two faces of me, I guess.
Okay. So I'll just give you all a minute to get that sorted out. Once you're sorted out, if you could also just give us give a little love.
Sorry, I've never used Zoom for large calls. Is there a way to see more faces on the side, or is that just a default thing?
So you have a number of different, you have a number of those icons at the top. There should be a hide thumbnail video, show active speaker video, show thumbnail video, and there should be a little 9 dots thing that will allow all.
Gotcha. Sharp.
Great. Super. Are we sorted? Right. Okay. Well, nonetheless, I'll begin in the meantime, and I think you can, if there's anything you still need to change in the background, feel free to do that. So, welcome. Finally, properly, we can finally begin. So I'm Simon Magwaza. We're who have we got coming through there? Okay, sorry. So Simon Magwaza. Yeah, your game, your sounds. Essentially, just a workshop to kind of steer us a little bit in the direction of working a little bit on sound, getting taking some of our ideas and really letting them blossom out, and hopefully become more a part of your game rather than just an add-on. So a little bit of background. Who am I? Essentially, I kind of first got into games and audio, I think, when I was into games quite early in my teens, and I think my first interaction in terms of game audio was basically I discovered that within Quake 3, a first-person shooter, you could go into your little base Q3 files, and essentially in there you could poke around in your little pack files, and I discovered that there were images and sounds and what have you in there. And of course, what I decided to do is replace some of those sounds And it really started off with super, super simple stuff. It wasn't, massive Hollywood sounds. It was just replacing it with pew, 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 pew. So, there'd be these amazing rocket launcher sounds, and then you switch to your machine gun and pew, 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 which I thought was just absolutely wonderful. And, that was it. I was hooked at that point. But I've not actually really been super involved in game audio until recently. It's something that I've taken many years to return to. So yeah, that's about all my real experience in game development. I joined last year into Make Games SA Game Jam 2019. It was a super cool experience. It was my first game jam that I joined in, and yeah, I think with that said, it's kind of an idea of, okay, well, if that's all my experience that I have, then, why even listen to me? And I think part of the thing is that I like this idea that coming to a game jam, you don't necessarily have to be an expert on each and every area within gaming. I think that's something I find quite interesting about about game development, is that everyone has their own story to tell, and everyone has something unique that they can bring to the picture. Welcome to our new joiners. Greetings. So yes, so that's kind of just a little bit of a background about me. In terms of my assumptions that I'm coming to this workshop with some preconceived ideas. Essentially, it's just that you already have some type of interest in games. You have some type of desire to build games or to create games, and that's pretty much about it. You just have to be interested in making games and interested in making your own sounds. Pretty much everything else that, we'll cover everything else within this workshop, and you'll be able to take it away from there. So, in terms of beginning kind of the first stages, I think my experience with my only game jam last year was, okay, I don't really know what the process is, but you have to start somewhere. And I think a core element is to really make sure that in your conceptualization that you really are not just adding in sounds from kind of whichever pack you can find. I think a lot of us have to resort to that, but I think ideally the idea is to be able to really glue the concepts of art and sound and all of this, really make sure that they mesh and they lock together and really tell what the theme of, really are really congruent to the theme of your game. So one of the things that I find works quite well is to start off with sound design, whether it's for film or for games, is to really try and get a palette of textures and moods. So if you're doing some type of if it's some type of bubbly paddle game, then the idea is that that's going to be a lot of bright colors. And in translating that over to the sound, it's going to be the first kind of ideas that come to my mind are perhaps bubbles and little gling gling glings, and I'm not sure exactly what the words are, but you'll find onomatopoeic expressions end up coming in a lot. So yeah, really you want to try and make sure that you have a good palette or a good idea of really what the textures and the moods are going to be in your game. And with that said, often sound, I feel like it's one of those things where graphics are really out there. Visuals in any kind of animated story or in some kind of game are kind of, everyone sees it and it's like, wow, that's groovy. But sound a lot of the time really acts as a supporting role. It's really there to help not just capture the player, but to make the mood feel that much more real. A lot of the time when it comes to sound, you're doing a really good job when people don't notice it. When someone gets so deeply immersed in the game because of all of the slightest textures and ways that you can play with someone's mind within their game. I think that's really winning. So sound, I definitely think a lot of the time is a supporting role. Yeah. So with that said, sound design, I think there aren't really there's no set way about, going about it. It's kind of like, how do I become a sound designer? Well, a lot of it is just experimentation. And if you follow any kind of, sound design hashtags and things like that on Instagram, on YouTube, Facebook, wherever it is, a lot of the time, some of the coolest sounds come from people just, I don't know, tapping on a bottle or stretching a banana skin over a bath. I don't know. Really weird things often come out from experimentation, and that's kind of, you might have an idea of where you want to go, but in getting there, experimentation is kind of the path to get there, and lots of it, lots and lots and lots of it. Yeah, there are no real golden rules. Quick points on games versus linear media. Often you'll see in a 30-second TV advertisement. Welcome. On a 30-second TV advertisement, we know exactly what's happening at every single sample, at every single second within those, within those 30 seconds. We can really craft and design things in such a way that we know exactly what to expect when it comes out. The thing with games is that oftentimes you don't know how long it's going to take a player to complete a level, or exactly in what way they're going to play, where they're going to be running. So there are a lot of things, and this is kind of a more minor point for now, but I think there are a lot of things that you might need to keep in mind when doing that, such as, how repetitive do my sound? We might have 5 footsteps, and that might sound like, oh, great, when you play them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that sounds super. When you bring them into your game, then you find that it's the same 5 sounds getting repeated 300 times a minute. You very quickly start to pick up on certain audio cues. So I think variation as well is something that is a bit more unique to games as opposed to, linear media. So just a quick point before I go on. Essentially, I'm just going to go through, going to spend about 20 minutes or so on the slideshow, kind of just going through all of the details. And then I think rather than chopping and changing between the slideshow and Reaper, we're going to just bang everything out in the slideshow, kind of get all the details across. What I have done is I've put together a project file as well as this PowerPoint presentation. So I'll just share that here once we're done, and then you're welcome to go back and go through things again. There'll be a couple of links at the end, and we'll have you as well as the project file. So if you are using Reaper, then you can see a little bit more of a put together version rather than just something that we kind of had to slam through for the workshop. All good? Super. Do we have any questions at this point? Nothing.
I was wondering, in this workshop, we'll be handling like overall sound design and effects, also like going to like the like music and the composition and all of that.
So this is scheduled to be a 2-hour workshop. I tried to, in putting this together, I tried to kind of think what would be the most beneficial for a short chunk, like 1.5 hours or 2 hours, that would allow, to kind of communicate a number of different ways to work with sound, but at the same time, not getting too bogged down. So I haven't actually covered music as part of that. To be honest, I think that was something we had thought about, but I think that's something that we could probably put aside as a whole workshop on its, on its own. So it's going to be mostly about manipulating sounds through layering, through filtering, through EQs. So if you already have some experience with sound, I think it'll kind of also show more opportunities where you can work on it. But at the same time, if you have never worked with sound before, then there's no need to to feel intimidated again.
Okay,
so
thank you.
A question? Sure, no worries. Charlie, hey Simon, sorry to ask again, but I set up Wasapi thing. Is there anything else you need to set up beforehand? So just to cover that again, I'm just going to just hop over to Reaper for those who are just joining us now. There isn't anything else, Charlie, to answer your question, there isn't anything else that you will need to set up. Just needs to be on Wasapi and on shared mode. For those of you who just joined us, welcome. we'll be working in Reaper for this project. If you would like to be able to hear audio out of both Reaper as well as through Zoom, you'll need to head over to within Reaper options, preferences, and under on the left hand side audio device, you'll want to select WhatsApp and shared mode, just to make sure you can hear through both Zoom as well as through Reaper. Groovy. Right, so let's hop back to our slideshow. So what I've decided is to come up with a kind of a hypothetical game that my a game that my hypothetical game jam team, we've decided on together. We've thought, okay, cool. We're gonna do some type of dungeon crawler. It's gonna be, I don't know, some type of third person dungeon crawler. There's gonna be, it's gonna be groovy, but we kind of need to figure out where we're gonna go from there. How we're gonna work on it as as a sound person. We've got our art team already busy over there. We've got our programmers setting up their basics. But where do we start on sound? So I find that what works best is to essentially just start with keywords. So this is just the order that they came to in my mind. Starting off, okay, dungeon, torches. I'm thinking of not just items, but also of kind of the sounds that go along with them. Got some crackling sounds. It's a dark dungeon. There's chains in the back. I don't know, maybe someone chained to the wall. It's kind of, stuff creaking. That leads on to, okay, cool. It's I don't know. I'm thinking of kind of where you start in Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion. Okay, it's going to be dark. It's dripping. It's kind of damp. All these kind of words that can help you build that palette of textures and moods and emotions. Cool. So, there's drafts coming through there. Maybe there are wooden doors, or there's some type of, I don't know, some wooden equipment going in the background. It's got this kind of crunching sound, something along those lines. Of course, it is a magical, some type of fantastical dungeon. So there's lava coming out the walls, or there's some type of a lava stream going through there. I find oftentimes I struggle to explain exactly what type of lava I'm thinking of, or what type of water, or what type of wind I'm thinking of. So in this case, I'll literally just write like, I'm thinking of like bubbling thick stuff that kind of, like air escapes from it, something along those lines. I don't know, maybe if you've ever cooked jam before, that's that kind of idea. Of course, you gotta have, crystals in there that are, I don't know, exuding mana, some type of energy. Cool, so I think we're starting to get a picture of what this dungeon looks like, yeah? Cool. Right, okay, a little bit more dark, There's, some metal sounds, maybe ching, or like little clinks, something like that, maybe from the chains. Maybe there's someone working in the back. Okay, stone. We've got big stone sliding doors, gears. I find oftentimes when we go into sound design, once you've come up with a lot of these sounds or these ideas, you'll be like, okay, cool. I know what's going to sound great for that. I'm going to find, actual gears that are, cogs that are moving together. And a quick tip is that I find oftentimes the exact sound that you record, or the sound of an actual door closing, a lot of the time that sound can be underwhelming, and you often need to find things that are maybe not actually the exact item, in real life that you're recording, but something else that sounds a little bit like it. So maybe a drawer of a cupboard moving in and out. I mean, there's no drawers in there, but that sound will kind of translate a lot better. Of course, dry rope, leather. If you really want to get dark, maybe someone's, I don't know, being tortured in this dungeon. It's it's up to you, really, how far you want to take it. So with that said, I put together this mood board. This will also work quite well to, as a kind of reference point. In the center here, some guy smithing tools or working on something like that. You've got your little torture devices here, your chains, your thick lava. Sometimes I'll find that working with just the keywords, as much as they're quite literal and they make sense, often just having the pictures there will spark other creative ideas. So that's something that I find works quite well for me. I'm guessing, do we have any graphic artists here or 3D modelers? Yeah. Do you also work with mood boards, Bryn, or something similar along those lines?
Yeah, we do work with mood boards quite a lot, so I find it kind of interesting that you convey sound through mood boards as well, but it does make sense in my opinion.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm just having to flip through pages here. I'm not sure. Did I miss anyone else? No. Okay. Cool. So yeah, that's kind of, we've got a kind of a broad stroke of where we're going with this. We've got the idea, but now comes the actual organization. And putting together an audio asset list is going to save you many, many hours, which are obviously super crucial in a game jam, of you having to scratch around and, oh, there's this file somewhere, it's down there, and I don't know what it is, especially when you're working with sound libraries that have, if you look at some of the Sonos.com GDC game audio libraries, like the latest library is 50 gigs. And if you have 10 of those libraries and you're having to, dig through all of those, it's not going to work very well to try and memorize all that stuff. So, yeah, putting together an audio asset list works, I think works well to keep things together. Also, you can put them in a number of different categories, and this will help you for planning out how you're going to lay out your session. So putting them into sound effects, ambience, music, user interface sounds, something along those lines will help you keep things a bit more organized. So if you see, this is the actual, the actual audio asset list that our team used for the project that we did last year at SA Game Jam. So that was Midnight Auto Supply. So yeah, essentially you can see scene, category, subcategory. The only point I'm going to mention on this is in terms of the actual source. So I think there's one column missing here, which comes just after source, where I put the actual link to the link and the license of the actual item. That might just help you for a little bit later when you need to remember, okay, well, I don't know, if anything comes up, knowing where you stand on licensing and knowing that you're 100% clean. Either you're using an audio library that you've paid for, or you're using something that's in the public domain. So I've also included a file which I'll upload at the end of this, which is the full asset list for the project that we're going through today. Any questions about this so far? All good. Cool. Right, let's continue. So a couple of resources. CC0. So essentially, you can read through the Creative Commons licenses online, but some good resources. CC0 is great because you're welcome to give attribution to the artists who created these, but if you would just like to use it, yourself without linking to who actually did it, or with any kind of restrictions, commercial usage, freesound.org is a great resource for that. You can just select CC0 sounds from there. GDC Game Audio Assets, they release a number of different packs. Some of them are quite big. They also have monthly asset packs which they put together. I've also put links to all of these at the end. Free to use sound. So this isn't actually, the name sounds like it's completely free to use. I think that might be I don't want to say misleading, but essentially the reason I have included this is that they have a really, really great license. It's a couple that goes around the world. They travel around, they do location recording, and you pay a once-off license, and from then on you also get access to any future material that they include as well. So no affiliation, but I really think that they've got some great stuff in there. Open Game Art is another resource. They have, besides just sound, they also have a number of other resources. And of course, you can record your own sounds. Only 2 points I'd bring about this is noise. Try and make sure that you're obviously not in a super noisy environment. And then also the noise of your actual device that you're using. So some devices, they might record they might have, like this mic that I'm using right now actually has quite a lot of background hiss. I'm not sure if it's picking up in Zoom. But yeah, equipment, I think, honestly, using your phone a lot of the time can just get the job done for most of what you need. If you really want to work in a professional setting, obviously location recorder and more expensive dedicated sound equipment, but I think working just off a smartphone, you can get a lot done with that. Excuse me. Right, so just 2 more screens before we hop over to Reaper. I would say this is not really something you need to worry about now, but something you can keep in mind for later. I would say there are 2 graphs that have really helped me kind of understand a lot about sound. Things like your frequency spectrum from your low pitch sounds to your high pitch sounds, actual volume or amplitude of your sounds, and your ADSR envelope. So if that doesn't make sense to you right now, don't worry about it. But these 2 graphs essentially, I think so this and the next graph, I think essentially have taught me most of what I need to know about sound. So this first graph simply being these little red lines that you see, essentially all that is telling you is that from your low frequencies, 20 hertz, kind of the super bassy stuff that you feel, right up to your ear-piercing 20,000 hertz. Essentially, all these lines say is that your human's hearing response is not flat across the spectrum. So, for example, at very low intensity or very low volume sounds, kind of this band between 1,000 hertz and 10,000 hertz, those are sounds that you're going to hear quite easily, but bass, you're not really not gonna pick up. The reason that's important is that if you have a sound that sounds super rad and you want to bring it into your game, but it's too loud, as you start bringing it down, you'll notice that you'll start losing a lot of the low end and a lot of the high end. So that's the one graph I would say keep in mind. The other graph is this ADSR envelope. Essentially all this says is that you have your attack phase kind of as your sound comes in from really soft to full volume. It kind of decays a little bit, it gets a bit softer. And then your sustain, S, is essentially just the volume that your sound holds at before it gets released. So I think I don't want to go too deep into these graphs, but I think these are just 2 resources that I think have been helpful to me and that I think you can come back and look at a little bit later. So tools we'll be covering for this, we'll be covering EQs and filters, a couple of effects such as reverb, distortion, flanger. We're going to be doing a bunch of different layering of sounds. We're going to be focusing on dynamics, so from, what's the range of loudness of a sound? Does it just stay soft the whole time, or does it have very soft areas as well as very loud areas? And we'll be also covering a little bit of using plugins such as VST and AU. Cool. So if you're all good with that, then we're going to hop over to Reaper. Any questions while we hop over?
I'm good, thanks.
Cool. Right. Excuse me. So if you did download the audio pack that I included, you'll see that that within it there are a number of different sounds. We've basically got some ambient sounds, you've got some music, and something called player, which is these are pretty much the sounds that we're going to be using for the background ambience, music of course, and player-centric sounds. So jumping, attacking, death sounds, that kind of thing. So, okay, so we've got this idea of this what do you call it, this dungeon that we're going to be working on. What I like to do is work on the background and kind of lay a bit of a bed to kind of place everything on top of. I think this, Imran, you mentioned music a little bit earlier. I think this is something that you can also apply to music in the sense of, if you have an idea for a track, often you could have your pads or you know, some kind of musical element that you can have as your starting, you know, your starting level or your kind of musical bed, and on top of that you can build everything up kind of like Lego bricks. So applying the same kind of concept here, we're going to work with some background ambience, and then we're going to just build on top of that. So within all of these sounds that we've got here, the sounds that I included in the workshop audio assets, essentially all of these are the sounds that you know, I think were relevant to this project. A quick thing about game jams is that often I find the most time consuming part is actually going through all of your sounds and kind of listening and curating things and putting them together. So I think it should be fairly smooth going and fairly quick from here, but I think with a game jam it would do put aside a few hours for this kind of process. I think you can build your way up as you're going there. Yeah, so let's just listen to a couple of them quickly. If you are having any issues with hearing audio, do also let me know. So yeah, it's kind of just like a bit of a background drone. It builds up a little bit later. Nothing too fancy. Got some wind interior. This I really like. This you might not be able to hear if you're just on laptop speakers, but it's kind of just a really, really low level hum in there. So yeah, pretty much where I start is, yeah, I think one good way to start off is you can just drag in all of your sounds, pop them onto separate tracks. As you can see, some of these are super long, you know, 3.5 minutes. I think we're probably going to aim for about a minute or so. So I think I'll just start off with trimming all of these down. Some of the sounds that you'll see that don't reach a minute, one thing I do like about Reaper is that it's really easy to just drag out and it automatically duplicates. Other DAWs, you might need to, you know, Control D or something along those lines to actually duplicate the sounds. Right, okay, so I think in terms of organization, something I think is good, double click on the left, you can create another track here. I'm going to drag it to the top. Another thing I like about Reaper, you can click this little folder icon and automatically it's going to keep all of these in a single folder, which when it's playing, you can mute the folder itself, and any other sounds you have in there, you can mute everything all together like that. Cool.
Sorry, could you just show again how do you make the folder?
Of course. So essentially, if you want to create a new track on the left-hand side here, and by the way, if you do have any questions as we go along, please do feel free to just ask. Don't feel like, you know, it's interrupting or anything. Double click on the left here. It'll create a new audio track. You essentially want to drag that right to the top of your hierarchy. And on the left-hand side here, there's a little icon, which once you click it, will put everything within that folder. And if you want to remove that, click it again, and everything comes out of the folder.
Awesome, thanks.
No, you're welcome. So, I mean, there's a quick and dirty way you can do this, which is essentially just dragging everything in. you know, turning the volume of these all the way down. Of course, you don't want to destroy your eardrums. And kind of just playing everything together to get a bit of an idea of how it all works together. I think mixing is quite powerful in itself. Oftentimes, just by playing around with the levels of different tracks, you can give quite a different feeling just within mixing. So something I'm hearing right now is a lot of these kind of tripping sounds, a little bit annoying. I'll turn that down a bit. Wind is a bit much as well. Cool. So, I mean, I'm going to be kind of fast forwarding a little bit through this process. I would say that a lot of this really does just come down to making sure that you can choose sounds that go well together, and making sure that you play around with those. So in hearing this, I think let's try and get a mix that sounds good for now. Of course, if you want to solo something out, just click the S button, solo it out. Now let's say that this track is something that I quite like, those dripping sounds, but I'm not such a fan of those other, the other sounds in the background. Within Reaper, you would click FX, and from here you can add on any number of either third-party plugins that you've purchased yourself, or any of the included plugins that come with Reaper. So let's take a bit of a look at EQ and filters. I'm just going to type in EQ. And at the top of the list here, RIA EQ. That's one of the included EQs that comes with Reaper, or re-EQ, I guess it would be. Yeah, here we go. We've got. Sorry, let me just solo this. So here we can kind of see what's happening in the audio spectrum. You can see there's quite a bit of hum down here. Yes, Ron, there are loads of sites that you can get really good plugins as well. Sorry, my brain, I just had a brain fart. Yeah, so a lot of plugins that you can get online. These are kind of just the included ones here, but I think working from pretty much any DAW, having any kind of VST plugin, yeah, can make your life a lot easier to really get the effects that you want. So, sorry, hopping back to the EQ, you can hear there's quite a bit of this hum happening down here. If I just want to include these higher frequency, those kind of drips, what I'm going to do is select this first band here, and you can just drag it down. And with some super simple EQing like that, you can get kind of just those drips and take out a lot of that hum, other sounds like that. Another way is you could also just select your type of filter from here, and you're going to go high pass. That's essentially going to just pass everything above that and cut everything below that. So if you just wanted that, just those high ends, you could do that. Alternatively, if you would just like to have your low end, let's play it again. Same thing here. Select that low pass. And there we go, kind of cut out a lot of that stuff. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to keeping those kind of drippy sounds. You can kind of get various areas to pop out as well like that. Cool, I think that sounds good for that. Soloing out a couple of other sounds. Drone, I think, bring that up a little bit. We've got our drips. Wind. I think the wind sounds okay as is. Again, you could spend quite a bit of time with EQ, this kind of stuff. Atmosphere stem. Let's bring that up a little bit. Also throw on another EQ. And just to make sure that we don't have unnecessary frequencies, kind of fighting with each other. I'm just going to cut out all of the high frequency content. So if you can kind of picture it, in that sense, you can have your low frequency content over here. You can have a number of different sounds. You can put in a low pass filter, and you can kind of work the body of your sound, and then you can also work the high end of your sound. Just by separating things like that, it can sound a little bit clearer rather than kind of having this muddy sound that's fighting on a number of different layers. I think that sounds good for now. Okay, so let's just call this our kind of background. Okay, I've got our background sounds for now. I think, what shall we move on to next? Lava. Lava sounds good. Okay, so we've got our ambience. So I separated it into, that was essentially the background sounds that we had. We also had a couple of fire sounds. I think by itself that probably won't do very much, but that's something we could add on top of our lava. Someone playing around with the torch. And then for our lava, so I listened through a number of different recordings. Something I do find quite interesting is that, just as the point I brought up earlier, sometimes the exact sound that you're looking for, or if you're trying to get the sound of someone eating a banana, sometimes the sound of someone eating a banana is not really going to be that convincing. So you have to get other sounds, great ideas. Actually, eating bananas is something that they often use in Foley for kissing scenes. Tomatoes, kind of just sticking your fingers inside tomatoes, little squelchy sounds. It can seem a bit graphic, but the sound design definitely, something to be had from there. So with that said, this is a recording of some actual lava. A little underwhelming, I think. When you start adding it to other sounds, such as bubbling mud. Kind of sounds like lava. Mud volcanoes. Okay, I think that sounds a little bit more like what we're looking for. Some sizzling sounds. So, that I think probably won't fit into this, but nonetheless, I think some of these early sizzles that we got work quite nicely. And then, this is another thought I had, an olive oil canister. Some of these sounds, at first might seem like they're not really usable, but sometimes you'll come across just a little like bloop 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 bloop, or some kind of bubbling sound that you can use in there. So we've got a background sound. Let's call this one lava. Let's actually start off with this hot bubbling mud. I quite like that. I'm going to drag that into another track here. And home, start off at the beginning, and we're just going to solo, we're going to make this lava into another folder, just so that we can work with just these sounds for now, and we're just going to solo the lava sounds. So essentially you won't be hearing any of the other background ambience from there. So, quick question, is there anything within this sound that you feel is not going to work well, specifically for working as any kind of lava.
There are like some bird trips, right? Something like that.
Yeah. Good point. So let's listen again. So sometimes you'll find a sound that you're like, this is perfect, except for that little bird in the back. I mean, I like you, little bird, but I don't like you in my sound. That's another thing that EQ is super useful for, is for just cutting out very specific frequencies. So one technique that this works very well for vocal processing as well, if you find that there's some type of nasal sound or something little in there that's quite annoying, but that doesn't cover a whole spectrum, then what you can do is you can try and scrub around. One point you will want to do, one thing you do want to do is make sure that you have a very narrow bandwidth. So again, FX, add an EQ. Within your EQ, you want to select your bandwidth, bring that all the way down, and from there you can kind of scrub around, and you can, let me just repeat. And once you find, once you find where that sound is, you can bring this this EQ band all the way down. Switch it around. Okay, so essentially what I'm hearing is that this tweeting is happening quite high up the spectrum, but then it's also happening kind of, you'll often see this kind of comb effect happening where there's one frequency and it duplicates itself at every harmonic of that. So, you know, maybe someone, you're in a room and someone says something at 500 hertz, then you'll also see the same sound popping up slightly smaller at 1,000 hertz, 2,000 hertz, 4,000 hertz. That can be quite difficult to try and cut out with this kind of technique. Sometimes all you can do is take your filter, selecting it, again, put it in a low pass and kind of cut everything off from there on, or from there upwards. Okay, I think that'll take a bit more work. I think we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, well, not perfect, but I think we've kind of communicated a little bit of the idea of being able to filter out sounds at certain frequencies. Was everyone good with being able to EQ out, getting to popping an EQ in and filtering out? Cool. Want to make sure I'm not leaving anyone behind. Cool, good. Okay. Right, okay. So we've got kind of a deep bubbling sound going here. Sorry, that tweeting is really annoying. Let's move this around a bit more. Cool, I think that sounds a bit better. Right, so we've got some hot bubbling mud going there. Right, let's drag in some of our other audio. So as you can see, this is a super long sound. Let's just listen to it quickly. We've got you can see from the waveform, we've got kind of 3 different sections. You can see there's this first section up until about there. I'm just going to press S to split. We've got our next section up until about there, S to split, and our last section. First section. Fairly convincing, I think. A little bit like bolognese, just put on a little bit And this sounds a little bit to me like I'm drowning inside a water drum. So I think we're gonna cut that one out as well. So okay, cool. So essentially, so far we've got a bit of background ambience. We've got some mud bubbling. We're gonna bring this down a bit. Sounding good. Right, let's bring in some crackly sounds. Now, again, popping back to that graph that I mentioned about the Fletcher-Munson equal loudness contour, you'll notice that although the actual output of this is not really much higher, sorry, of this sound, is not really that much higher than any of these other sounds. It definitely sticks out a lot more. So this is kind of one of those points I was talking about where if we put in an EQ, here I click the effects, again, EQ, you'll see that these sounds will often stick out a lot more to your ear. Sometimes they need to be tamed a little bit more. So I would probably just bring that down a bit. Again, add another high pass over there, just so I can get those frequencies out by themselves. Cool. It's kind of sounding like lava. I'm not quite convinced yet. What do you guys think? Okay, stony faces. So okay, let's add in a couple of crackles. So I think we've talked quite a bit about EQ. I think EQ is probably one of the two main tools that you'll use in sound, whether this is in music production or whether you're talking about sound design. I think in terms of actual audio tools, that's the one, I don't want to say the one half of the equation, but that's one of the main tools. One of the other tools is compression. So if we listen to this little crackle sound again of someone frying up, I don't know what. Sorry, let me turn this down a bit. Rest in peace, ears. You'll hear that super, like it really pokes through in that high end. So the immediate solution would be, okay, well, I'll just turn it down. And I think let's take out those mms at the end. Quick tip, within Reaper, if you do want to change the length of your file or trim the edge of your file, you can just mouse over to the end, click and drag over. Right now it'll snap to those increments. If you wanted to go out of those or not snap to those increments, you hold down Shift and you can just do an exact trim over there. So I'll scroll down. So back to the original point I was saying is that the first solution might be to just continue turning things down, but then we might find, and as we turn it down and down, then we start losing a lot of the character. Especially if you listen to that last sound, so let's say I'm just looking for the last sound. One of the other tools that we can use is compression. So typing in, sorry, again, just FX, comp, recomp, and this is one point I will mention here. I think a lot of the tools that are included within Reaper visually are perhaps not super easy to use. I know when I first started working with compression and EQ, but specifically with compressors, it can seem a little bit intimidating just seeing a bunch of stuff. You'd be like, I don't know what any of this does. I just want the sound to sound more like, compressed. I want it to squish down. So that is one point that I will add. If you working with a number of other, I'll just drag in another VST here or another plugin. For example, a lot of other VSTs like pretty much any VST have, kind of big knobs which make it a little bit easier and a little bit more intuitive to see what's happening. So this I haven't included within the tutorial, but essentially what we'll be doing is just changing these parameters. It's really just going to be doing the same thing here. Just remove that. So essentially what we're hearing here, if we listen to the sound by itself, what a compressor does is essentially it's just an amplifier. It might not look like it at this point, but essentially what we want to do is that as we turn this threshold down, it's going to be squashing anything that goes past that threshold. So essentially what you can use it to do is if you have a sound that starts off very loud, and in fact, perhaps I should find a better sound here. I think this will work a little bit better. Sorry, excuse me. So for example, we've got some of these sounds. You can see it starts quite loud and then it tapers off and it gets very soft there. Listening to it. Oh, sorry. Let's turn that back up. It starts quite loud and then it gets quite soft quite quickly. If you want to maintain that kind of sizzling, crackling sound, essentially what a compressor will do is that it will make the softest sounds louder, or the softest parts of your sound louder, and it will bring the loudest parts of your sound down. So in that sense, it's kind of like squashing it or compressing it essentially. So what we can do here is without our compressor, oh, sorry, I don't work in Reaper that much, excuse me. Without compression. And then within our compression, essentially, sorry, with compression on, we want to bring our threshold down. And then this ratio is probably one of the most important, between threshold and ratio, these are the two most important parameters to change. So ratio here, essentially, it's saying everything above this threshold is going to come out at, 1:1. As we start putting this up, it's going to be compressed by a factor of 12:1, by a factor of 40:1. So, for example, here, it could come through 43 decibels louder than the threshold, and it would be compressed down to 1 decibel louder. So generally, you'll probably want to be in about, depending on what material you're working with, the 2 to maybe 10 range. Anything above that is just going to completely crush the sound. So let's listen again. With the compression on. That's a mistake we often do. You'll be like, I think it sounds better. It definitely sounds better. It sounds good. Right. Effects are off. So. Okay, not much effect. I'm not seeing any compression happening. Some compression. Let's turn it down a little bit more. Turn the ratio up. So essentially here we've put a very low threshold and fairly high ratio. You can see it's compressing a lot, and the sounds at the beginning sound about as loud, once it kicks in, sorry, as the sounds at the end. I'm not sure how obvious it is with this specific material, but essentially it flattens the sounds and makes everything a little bit more level. So, where were we? Back to our lava sound. Cool, so we've got some lava going. I want to bring in some sizzles. Be a little bit loud. Turn that down a bit. One thing you can do within so you have two level controls or two volume controls. Essentially, you have your channel volume over here. But you might decide that you've set your channel to a nice volume, but then some of the other material is coming through a little bit soft or a little bit loud. So clicking here, S to split. I'm just going to drag the ends off here, add a fade at the top, fade in, drag those sides in. So let's say that we decide we like the tone and the texture of these two sounds. But the second sound we want to have a little bit softer. You also have a volume control. If you just hover over here, bring that down as well. Every DAW is going to work differently with it. Connectivity issues. Sorry about that, Charlie. We'll get a recording up. So if anyone else is also having any kind of connectivity issues, we'll be recording this, and you're welcome to obviously have a look at this afterwards if you'd like to. Again, also if you'd like to just review again. Right. So essentially we've used our compressor to kind of level our sounds out. We've done some EQing. We've balanced the sounds with a little bit of volume. One thing I would say is with these kind of random one-shots, as you might call them, sounds that just go off every now and then, if you were making this as a single soundtrack, a minute track might sound good when you've listened to it 2 or 3 or 4 times. Putting in too many one-shots after listening to it for about 10 minutes, your ear becomes very attuned to those sounds, and you'll definitely start picking up on a lot of those sounds. This isn't covered within the context of, within this workshop, but something you definitely could have a look at is using some type of middleware software such as Wise or Fmod. Essentially what that allows you to do is use, for those of you especially more familiar with programming, you can essentially use game events to trigger these sounds at random intervals, or at set times, or to rotate through these. But again, that's kind of a bit of another topic. I think that's sounding pretty good so far. I'm sure we must have some questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, so the effects applies to that whole channel of sound, right?
Yes.
And you can change the volume by like doing that fade curve for each segment in that. Is it a track or a channel? A track.
Yeah. So this is your track or channel, depending on what terminology, and then this would be your clip.
So you can change the value, the volume per clip, but the effects has to apply to the whole thing. Can't do that per clip, right?
There aren't any. Yes. So as it stands right now, this is essentially an inline effect. So everything on this track will go into this effect and come out. What you can do is you can do rendered effects. I'm not actually sure how to do it on Reaper. But essentially you would just apply that one effect, you would hear it, you would preview it, and then you would apply it to the track. That would change the actual file, the actual wave file. So that would apply it to that one clip. So for example, if you've seen, or if anyone here has worked in Audacity, you'll see that you can't apply inline effects as far as I'm aware, but you can apply effects such as reverb and what have you. Benefit of using inline effects is that you can decide to change the parameters later or undo something. Once you have rendered an effect into audio, that's done. It's a done deal unless you are Control Zing your way all the way back.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool.
I have other questions too, but I don't want to like dominate.
Well, let's see. Does anyone else have any other questions? If not, I'm happy to.
I have a very simple question, right? Like when you
Yes.
control the volume on the clips, how do you get it to like ease out? How do you get it like to curve? Because like I can only like move it around like as a flat line. I can't have it fade out.
Of course. Okay, so your volume essentially, or this little item volume, controls the volume for the entire clip. And then if you mouse over to the end, you'll see this little curve icon come up. Sorry, you must excuse me if I'm rushing through everything. Please, if you do, these are the types of questions that I think are important as well, because this definitely workflow is super important with this kind of stuff. So if you so you mouse over the end, and then you can essentially drag in or out, and that'll just add your fade. You'll notice once you do have a fade in, if you trim the end of the clip, every software handles it differently, but here it moves the fade with the trim. Cool.
Okay, thank you. I just don't work with audio usually, so.
No, of course. I mean, that's exactly why we're doing this. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer. If no one else, Jonathan?
I was also wondering, especially for ambient stuff, if there's a way to get things to loop without like hearing a pop.
Yes, great question. So let's actually look at, let's look at an example. Here we go. So we can see that that's just a hard ending to this clip. Essentially, actually it's not, I lied. Okay, so there you go. You can see that if you zoom all the way in, you just scroll in and out with your mouse wheel. I think in Reaper it goes to wherever your cursor is. So you'll see the end of this clip kind of ends, the actual wave ends below the 0 point. So as it loops back again, you'll hear this or a pop often happening. So a couple of tricks. You can, of course, just fade out like that. Just zooming out. If I bring this repeat section over here, okay, perhaps this isn't the best example. Let's rather do it like that. So changing my loop section. As I get around to here, there's no, okay. Why is it not looping? Sorry. So just repeats, toggle repeats. I think if you solo it, it'll be easier to hear. So there you can see, even though that's another kind of issue you might run into, is that even if the sound doesn't have any kind of pop or click, sometimes there's a tonal difference between the beginning and the end. Just hearing again. I'm not sure if you could pick that up, but it kind of there's a bit of a change there. Something that I do find works well with that is blending through. So holding down Control to copy another clip over. As you drag your clip over, you'll see in Reaper it automatically does a bit of a crossfade. So just turning repeat off. If you go back to this section, you'll see there should be a bit of a smoother transition. I'll put it up a bit so you can hear. So often fades will work like that. Alternatively, if you're just working in a 1 minute section like this, then what I might suggest is to have some areas fade in or fade out. For example, I might want this kind of airy drone to fade out a little bit earlier, and then have some other sounds going so that when it loops back, I can make a selection from those sounds and find one that repeats nicely so that you don't hear all of the sounds all changing at the same time. Does that make sense? I don't know if I explained that well.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, groovy, super. Okay, I didn't actually set a timer before we started, so I'm not sure where we're at. So I think we've got about how long? An hour left? Half an hour left? 45 minutes? How are we feeling? Are we good for now?
If there's a little bit of time,
Yeah.
I've got one more question.
Of course, Andrew.
So when you drag a clip out to the side, you can make it loop. Is there a way to kind of do that automatic crossfading as you drag this thing out so you can kind of get an infinite loop going? Or are you going to have to like manually crossfade clips over and over?
So you're working within Reaper, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So essentially, I think within Reaper, if you hold down Control, it brings up this little copy symbol. Anything you drag over will automatically apply a crossfade. Okay. As for your entire looping section, there's a little loop control at the top here. So you can select how long you want that to loop. But if you drag any sound over, you'll see it automatically does a crossfade. For other DAWs, if you're working on it, then you might, for example, in Pro Tools, you would do a selection. So you'd do a selection like that, and then you'd apply a crossfade over that section. So it depends on which audio you're working in, but in Reaper you just drag it over.
Okay, but there's no way where you can. So you know how you dragged out the right-hand edge of a clip to make it loop. There's no way to kind of have this like auto crossfade going.
Oh, okay.
If you know what I mean, yeah.
I think essentially what you'd want to do. So let's say you have these two clips. So I'll just Control D to get that. Essentially, what I would do is, in this case, I would have the two. So I'd drag over, do the crossfade, select both of the clips, and pressing G puts them in a group. I believe. Oh no, it doesn't. I lied again.
Oh, that was a good idea though.
Good question. So again, you can just duplicate. This is a little bit tedious, and I'm sure there is a much better way to go about it. Again, I think this is also, another point that I would like to bring up is that at the end of the day, when it comes to choosing a DAW, I think what works best for you and what allows you to do these specific kinds of things of being able to very quickly get in and out and get what you want done is probably more important than, especially in something like a game jam, is probably more important than the feature set. I know, having used Ableton Live, Reaper, Pro Tools, BandLab, a number of different things, I find, simply because of my workflow, I find Pro Tools works really well for me. I've spent a lot of time in it, so it's very can get around.
Cool.
So yeah, excuse me if I'm fumbling, but I will look that up, and if you want to share deets, then I'm happy to try and find a solution. Give it to you afterwards.
It's still miles faster than Audacity, so
fair enough. To each their own. Groovy. Okay, so right, so I don't want to spend too long on the ambience. So I'm just gonna kind of drag a couple of sounds to give us an idea of what we'd be aiming for. Again, I'll include all of these in a project at the end that you can look through and see where we have spent a little bit more time on polishing and perfecting this kind of stuff. But so we've got a couple of rock sounds we included. Drag this down. So let's say you've got a bit of an idea. You've got these one shots going from time to time. They're kind of adding to the ambience, but again, the ambience is really only going to take you so far. So let's work on a couple of player sounds for now. What I'm going to do to also help with organization is one thing I like to do is label all of my tracks. Firstly, label all my tracks, but then also color them. So selecting all of them, right click, track color, set to one random color. Okay, we've got green lava. I love it. Let's set all of the background, track, one random color. Okay, actually this lava is gonna annoy me, sorry. So, okay. Custom color, let's get some orange going there, groovy. Okay, cool. So we've got our lava going there. Interestingly enough, I must say that once you've color coded your tracks and you've named things and it's easier to navigate around your session, it also makes it a lot easier for you to, or for me at least, to kind of get in and really, I don't know, I feel like it puts me more in touch with the session to be able to have things the right color. For music, that definitely helps, making sure you always, have, I don't know, let's say you have your bass blue, your piano red or purple, your kick drum and what have you red. That'll also help you get around a bit quicker. Excuse me. So we've got our lava. Let's quickly look at some player sounds. So I included, as you've seen, most of the sounds that we've used so far have been have been sounds that we've gotten from some type of audio pack or some game development audio bundle. But one thing I did want to demonstrate is how you can definitely take your own sounds and record your own ambience. So it was actually, sorry. Okay, my apologies. I think I did not include that specific rock sound I was looking for, but essentially, yeah. So you can take your phone and just record yourself kicking around rocks and pebbles and what have you. A lot of the time, the sounds do actually work quite well. As for voice acting, I will say it's something that I thought, when I first started, I thought would be something super easy. Oh, I've got the sound in my head. He's going to be like this little dude. He's going to be impish. And you're like, okay, cool. Let's record. It sounds great until you actually listen to it, and then you start hearing the snot in your nose. And
I feel that. There have been a few takes I've listened to be like, nope.
Definitely. So I think it's something I would say try it. Because if you don't try it, then you don't know. But yeah, so I included a couple of sounds. So I did kind of like an attacking sound of so I'm picturing, okay, we've got this either side scroller or some type of third person view of us running around this dungeon. We're going to be running into skeletons, attacking them. We're going to be, jumping. So got a little attacking sound. That's my favorite. So nothing amazing, but with a little bit of processing, we can get it done. Oh, this is the gravel sound that I found. So this was just me walking around outside, kicking around a bunch of stones. It was in the middle of the night and it was fairly quiet in my neighborhood. I was just kind of like a crazy person outside kicking stones around. But yeah, point is that was just done on a phone. It sounds completely fine. I've used it in a number of different, animations, sound design projects. So yeah. Back to voice acting. I also did a bit of a dying sound. I have been told by my significant other that this sounds not safe for work, apparently, but this was my take on dying. No! So some of them like that, just it doesn't. That's not. I think some of the sounds
Only
just,
out of context does it sound bad.
perhaps, but anyway, either way, I think a lot of them. So sometimes you'll find with a couple of these sounds that it does work okay, and you just need to play around with it. Okay, sorry. So I just dragged that in there. You'll see that this little gray track automatically went under the lava track. I'm just going to drag that out, and I'm going to double click, make a player folder, add dying to that, and we've got a folder there. Okay, so I'll just keep the other sounds so we have a bit of an idea of how they work together. No! So I think a lot of this will really just be chopping up your sounds. Click and press S to separate. If you're in Pro Tools or something like that, you can, I think in Reaper you can do it as well. You can write automatic scripts to just strip all the silence and put these into separate clips. And then really just choosing your best takes from there. So I think that sounds okay, but I think I would probably get a little bit tired of it after dying 100 times. Cool, so let's say we've chosen these as our clips, and we've decided that the rest are not really up to par. Cool, so we've got our clips here. Oh, sorry. Something you'll find is sometimes you cut your clip in the wrong place. Great tool you can use with Reaper, or a great little extension. You just click down your audio, you hold Alt, and you can just drag your content within those clip boundaries. So you can just drag that clip or that audio till it starts right at the end, or the beginning, sorry. Drag in there. Same with this, Alt. Come on, guys. Sorry. Shift to free, to trim freely. Okay, so we've got a couple of our clips. Again, I think this is probably the least glamorous part of it. Something you will find is that if you don't have fades in, then sometimes you won't necessarily notice that your sound ends there, and it's quite jarring as it ends. So again, you just want to add in your fades here. Maybe play with the length a bit. So that one needs to change. So okay, we've got some death sounds, not super. Now let's bring in our attacking sounds. So something that I did here, this wasn't intentional, but something you will notice is that, well, yeah, let's just listen to them. You'll hear there's quite a bit of a pitch difference there. So something very useful you can do again is holding down Alt and Shift. Imran. So holding down Alt and Shift, when you mouse over your clip, you get it gives a little pitchfork or a little pitchfork symbol, and from there you can very easily alter the pitch. So this is quite useful if you you know, if you want to make your player sound a little bit more, you know, more heavy. In this case, I don't think it works that well to bring it down. So what I'm going to do is rather, again, Alt Shift, click, and drag up. I'm gonna doing that, I'm going to bring the pitch of this up, and perhaps this one a bit down. Until they make a bit of a better match. Sorry, pitch up, pitch up, pitch up. I think that matches a bit better.
I have a quick question.
Yes, Imran, what's up?
When it came to recording these attacking and death sounds, how come you decided to like record them all in like one take and not like record them as like their own separate clips and stuff?
I think from my experience, it's just generally easier if you can record in a single file and then from there manipulate within, within Ableton Live or whatever. You can split this up, and then once you are happy with all of those, then you can render those out as individual files. I find that if you have 60 takes, especially doing it on a phone, you need to record, type in the name, record, type in the name, record, type in the name. So I find it's a lot easier for me, for my own workflow, to just record a number of different takes. So that's the first thing, is just logistically, it's easier to have one file or to work with one file. And then secondly, also, I feel like it allows me to perhaps try a number of different tones and work it progressively over one file. So I can I know I did this recording, I tried in the beginning, it was a bit deeper, in the end it was a little bit higher, in terms of pitch. So that allows me to, try a couple of different things within a single take.
Okay. But
yeah.
Like, would this also be a case of like it just boils down to like the person itself and what they have on hand when it comes to making their like sounds and that?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally, even like if I think whether maybe this is just something I've adopted from having worked in studios and having done a lot of dialogue, for example, is just to have long single takes. I think that's just what works for me. Being able to apply commands like strip silence and then split those into multiple files, rather than having to navigate around my file explorer and try and find different files, for example.
Okay.
But yeah, again, it's just about workflow. If you find that it works better for you, if you know, okay, it was the 6th take that I did, I'll just hop down to file number 6. If that works better for you, then I think do that. Yeah.
I have a rendering question on the same topic. If you have you've done this situation and you really like a few certain takes from it, you're going to want to keep those sound clips in this program, presumably, to compare them to the ambient sound and see, okay, that fits in, that's a bit whack. You sort them out. When you want to render that out, is there a way to select a specific clip and render just with the effects on the track into a single sound file? Or?
So it depends which program you're working in. I believe in Reaper, if let's say, for example, it's just this one track. If I understand your question correctly, saying how can I bounce just this one file out or render this one file out with the effects included, correct?
Yeah, just that one file, but obviously just that track, does it respect the solo mode toggle? Or?
So usually how that is handled is that there would be, you would have something like render items as new take, or depending on how it handles it, I think even if you go glue items, after it did that little bit of processing, you'll see that it's rendered it out into a new file called attacking-glued.wav. So previously these were all attacking.ogg, that was a single long take, and then it's rendered this out into attacking-glue.wav. So I think once you navigate to your project, let's see. Okay, well, once you navigate to your project, then it should have it saved in there. Speaking of which, don't ever do what I've done and work for an hour and a half and not save your project. So I think that, yeah, that goes for any kind of work. So
if in the chat,
audio project.
I think once you experience that one time, like, you learn it the hard way.
Definitely. We were, yeah. Oh, I've got too many stories. Let me not sidetrack us. Okay, cool. Do we have any other questions? Good for now.
I was wondering, like, it's also like with like recording and like making the like the overall sounds of the level. Which one do you do first? Because I feel like if you've made the sounds and then you go and if you just like do the dialogue first and then the sounds, it kind of like doesn't really allow for a way to like does I'm trying to figure out, like, when you record, does the sound like do you ever have times where like you're recording and the sounds don't really match up with what you're going for? Like you're recording your dialogue and that, but it sounds like it's in a field when you're actually in like a dark cave or something.
Yeah, that I think that comes a little bit from experience, but generally what I try and do to avoid that problem is, okay, so if I'm listening to, to a whole bank of different files or a whole collection of different files, kind of just as I find files that I enjoy, usually what I do is I do all of the listening within my DAW rather than doing it within my file explorer. That way it's very easy for me to kind of just stack to sounds. Oh, okay, cool, I like this. Let's see how it sounds with with just, oh, sorry. Ooh, where are we? With just that sound. So often what I'll do is I'll try and, as I'm collecting my sounds, I'll try and kind of stack them on top of each other just to get a bit of an idea of how that is going, and if they do work together. Sometimes you'll think it'll sound great and then you put stuff together and the two sounds sound good by themselves, but once you put them together, they don't really mesh. As for making sure that you stick to the general theme or the general sound palette, I think that also comes with practice. It's just something, and I don't mean practice as in years and years of practice, but kind of as you go through your project, you'll kind of start getting closer towards the idea that you had in mind. I'm not sure if that answered your question or if I was just...
No, it's cool. As someone who's also trying to was flubbing the question, I kind of picked up on what you're trying to put down. It's like something that comes with trial and error and time, and as you work through the thing, you kind of slowly get that close to that sound palette you want.
I think there are some things that you can kind of keep in mind you can use tools to, for example, let's say I bring in my EQ on this take, listening to them, you can see that a lot of the content does fit into this middle area. So, for example, I might find that with some type of lava sound or whatever it is, I might see that there's a lot of low-end content, and then another sound also sounds good, but there's also a lot of low-end content. Then as I'm curating those sounds, I just need to keep in mind for later, okay, there's, the two sounds are going to be clashing or kind of fighting for that low range. So I'm going to have to, cut off some of that or reduce some of those sounds. So that is kind of also just something you want to keep in the back of your mind as you're going along. Yeah. Cool. Everyone still good? Still fresh? Yes, yeah. Okay, cool. Right, okay, so where were we? Okay, so we've got, is this sound dying? Okay, that sounds a bit more like jumping or... Yeah! Okay, so we've got our attacking sound. Yeah! But it's, I don't know, this kind of, I can imagine him maybe punching or something like that, but there's not really much else to back that up. So what we want to do is we definitely want to layer this. We figured that this little character has a, I don't know, some type of sword or something along those lines. So oops, sorry. Something also included here is a couple of whip sounds. As you can hear, it kind of sounds like the person doing the recording was standing on a wooden floor, maybe wooden floorboards, or there's something in the back there. So although I do like the sound, there is something we need to add on top of this, or there is something we need to do to the sound, some treatment. So what we can add is a noise gate, or a gate rather. Adding in a gate, essentially what this is going to allow us to do, and let me just set the section to repeat here, so we don't have to keep pressing play and pause. Oi. Yeah. So two things, I'm seeing that it's clipping, it's super loud. Turn that down a bit. There's still that noise in the background. So what we want to do is we want to add a gate, sorry. So what that allows, essentially what it does is it doesn't allow any sound through until it reaches that threshold. So that's really great for if you're recording in a noisy environment, for example, or there's some kind of background hum or something like that, and you don't want that hum included. You essentially just want to bring this threshold up. So there you can see we've set it a little bit high, so it's not really allowing the full body of the sound to come through. It's cutting off the attack, the attack part of it, and then it's kind of at its peak, it's suddenly letting it through, and then it's cutting off again. Set it too low, and you get those noises coming through again. So it sounds good so far. What I am hearing is that the gate's closing very quickly. So we're hearing the sound and then it's closing very quickly. So it's not allowing that sound to kind of decay. So what we want to do is we want to increase the hold. That's just going to increase the time that the gate remains open for and allows sound to pass through. And you can also play around with the release characteristic. So no release. It closes very abruptly. Increase the release. And it stays open and slowly closes that gate. So these are just some characteristics you can play with. Again, just like with our EQ, you can add in a low pass filter, so it only allows everything above this frequency to pass. Or only everything below this frequency. Sorry. High pass, my bad, I'm mixing my filters up. So in that case, within that spectrum of audio, there's only a little bit of it that qualifies to pass through the gate. So we're going to allow everything to pass at this point and just play. Oops, sorry. Cool. Okay. So let's layer these sounds quickly. I'm just choosing these fairly randomly at this point. But essentially what we're going to aim to do is lay these sounds with with the other sounds that we have. So let's hear them together. Okay, so needs to move around a little bit, but it doesn't sound too bad. So for some of these, I'd probably just move them around again. Shift allows you to break outside of those discrete intervals. Oh, sorry. So yeah, if I was spending more time on this, I think I probably wouldn't choose a take like this because there's a bit of crackle. If you listen to the voice at the end. However, what you could also do is just bring this back and trim the end off. So trimming is also, it allows you to do a lot of, to cut out a lot of work rather than trying to find a better take. Oftentimes you can just play with the volume envelope there and just trim the end off and get it to sound a bit smoother there. Cool. That's okay. Let's hear them in context. Sounds okay. Sounding better and better. Again, with something like this, I would probably want to make the volume different, or the intensity of the clips different at different points. So maybe make some of the whip sounds a bit louder, some of them a little bit softer, just to give a little bit of variation to your clips. Or so. So I think the example in the actual project, which I'll share afterwards, has, you know, this is kind of the part that I think is the finessing. I must say, in terms of audio, I feel like the good thing about it is that you can get 80% of the way there with 50% of your time. So you can get good results in kind of an okay period of time, but the last 20% definitely takes, or definitely can take, the remaining 50% of your time. So I remember a lecturer who would, you know, one of his favorite things was you need to include, you know, big, gruff, hairy man. He'd say, you know, you need to include beard scratching time. And I was like, what do you mean? So his thing was essentially, you know, it's like you'll get this snare drum, ga, ga, and sometimes you just need to let it sit in the track and just kind of just chill for a bit. So whatever your little tick is, you know, I don't know. But yeah, I think that last polishing part is really just what takes I'd say the remaining part of your time. Okay, cool. So got some dying, attacking sounds. It's starting to get a little bit messy. I'm not really too sure of what's going on in the session. So what I would probably do at this point is also start adding in some markers. So cool, I've got some folder organization that's keeping things together a bit, but when your session starts getting big, there's a lot going on, you definitely want to make sure that you know exactly where things are happening. So let's say these clips and all of these clips, I've got them starting here. Oops. M for marker. Attack sound. Just so that later it's going to be a little bit easier to navigate around your session. We've got our attack sound there. We've got our, what are these? Totally believable dying sounds. Add in your marker there. Oh, why is this not? Sorry, my screen share is covering this. Okay, cool. Dying sound. And just as you go along, making sure you've got your markers. Cool. Let's add in one more thing for the player, that's just going to be some walking movements. So essentially, we've got our background ambience. We haven't done, I mean, in this project, we haven't done any enemy sounds. There are some great plugins out there you can use. Some of them are crazy expensive, 600, 800 US dollars. There are many of them that are completely free, which is great as well. But some things like Reformer, where, and, you know, what's it called? I think it's called Creature Sounds. So you can basically talk into your mic and then it, you know, does all kinds of stuff on your voice to change it. So, sorry, where was I? Oh, right. So we wanted to have our walking sound. Let's name this one walking. And this walking sound, we're going to create a couple of layers as well. So we might as well just make that into a folder right away. The 3 sounds I'm thinking of using, or 2 or 3 sounds, is this kind of leather sound. I'm not sure if that's loud enough. Let me turn it up a bit. So you might find that that works just fine by itself. I think it did come also out of one of these game audio packs. And then also a bit of gravel crunch underfoot. Cool. So let's drag those 2 in. Okay. So again, same type of vibe with a lot of this. It's really just splitting your clips up. Oops. Splitting your clips up and doing a lot of layering. So it might seem, I think it might seem like a lot of this is repetitive. It's kind of just doing the same thing. I think in sound design, there's kind of two areas. There's, or 2 areas that I focus on, or that I see. It's the kind of the creative, I mean, all of it is creative, but I think, for example, you get your sound synthesis and your, you know, working with synthesizers and plugins and stuff like that, or manipulating sounds where it's coming up with like really weird and creative sounds. And then there's the other kind of more basic, just layering and editing. So I think a lot of decent sounds can be made just from using a number of different layers, using some EQ and using some compression. So I've got this guy. I've decided to use a number of these individual sounds. Oops, sorry. That sounds cool. I'm going to trim this down a little bit. Put a fade. Now with this sound, essentially when I was recording, I was moving quite slowly. So a lot of the sounds kind of drag out like that. They go on for quite a bit. Again, this comes down to your envelopes. Using fades, you can really change the characteristics so it feels like there's a very short decay or a very short release. So just doing things like that, you can really alter the sound without having to necessarily take a different take. So here, I'm hearing that the gravel sounds nice and snappy, but the leather or whatever that sound is kind of drags in. It takes quite a while to come to its peak. So I'm gonna add a bit of a fade here, Alt, to move the content in. I'm gonna shorten the last bit, add another fade over here, move it around a bit. And like that, you can kind of get a bit of a footstep vibe. Cool. So this is a bit of a time-consuming process, so I don't think I'm gonna go through all of this. I think that does kind of demonstrate the idea. Any other ideas or questions about this kind of content? All good for now. Cool. Okay. So let's maybe just cut 1 or 2 up, and then I think we'll finish up with this section. So I am hearing that this also sounds a little bit like I'm walking on, I don't know, snow or ice cream or something like that. So perhaps what I might do, and Andrew, I think I think this would be a good example of when to perhaps use, and Jonathan as well, I think this also came into same type of question, is this would be a good example of perhaps when to use rendered effects, where within the track you have a number of different clips all from the same take, but you want to just change the tonality of just one clip. Then perhaps you would do some EQing along the lines of something like that to kind of, something like that to kind of tame the highs. So essentially you would apply your processing just to this clip. I wish I knew more about Reaper and I would be able to explain exactly how to do that from here. Sorry, I can't. But I think this, for example, is one, I'm sure there are, what do you call it? I'm sure there's documentation out there about how to do this specifically within Reaper, applying an effect just to one clip.
Can I ask like a, it's going to be another frustratingly vague question, but for the purposes of a game, I assume like what you're doing here, you would want each of these crunches separate so that you could sort of squish them close together if you were doing like a chuk 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 run kind of sound? Or is that crazy talk? Would you render them all together as like a long thing and then speed it up and then try and not have a pitch shifted? Like what are some approaches there?
So, I mean, I'm not too clued up on the programming side, but I would assume that each of the footsteps would be handled as individual events. This does also kind of cross into the territory of using audio middleware, specifically something like Wise, where you have the opportunity to either take a single long rendered clip like this, and what you can do is you can create a kind of container of events. So, for example, it would say each time I receive, this event of play a footstep, then play this section of the audio clip.
So it can refer to like specific timestamps within a clip, in the same way that like pixel art refers to like locations on a big raster.
Exactly. Yeah. So. So I can send some links through as well afterwards, but definitely check out Wise. That covers a lot of this kind of stuff. If
That's
you
awesome.
are working on a game where, perhaps you don't have time to do your integration, or, perhaps your programmer is busy, is not going to have time to do some type of audio implementation like that, then what I would do is just render each of these out as individual clips. And assign those to that, whatever that command is or whatever that call is for a footstep.
Right. And then
Otherwise,
I assume
I think
you run into channel limits if you're trying to like layer an individual sound clip over 1,000 other things.
So yes. So sorry, are you talking about within your game or within your?
Yeah. Like if you ask the game engine to render like 3 footsteps on top of each other and you're doing everything else as tiny clips, I'm assuming.
So I think how I know, at least within Unity, I'm guessing it probably works the same across a number of different engines, is that you have a kind of hierarchy or priority. So if you have 2,000 sounds that play at the same time, then it would go from whatever hierarchy has been set to each audio sound. Because of course that is important. If you have some type of background ambient noise, that's probably not going to be as important as a rocket that's about to fly into your face. You definitely want the sound of the rocket to be elevated over the sound of reflected footsteps from the other side of the map or something along those lines. Yeah.
So if I can just add a little bit to that, like specifically in Unity, you actually have like quite a rich like mixer tracks like sort of deal that you can play around with. Again, I'm not sure like for other game engines, because I haven't like thrown a bunch of audio at any other game engines, but at least in Unity, you have a lot of control in terms of like what's going on with your sound and how it's going to be prioritized and played.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Super groovy. Thank you. Right. So, I think we've got a bit of an idea of the creation side of things. So I want to kind of finish up this this section. Let's just piece these all together. Let's hear them all together. I just want to arrange these tracks a little bit better so we can hear them in sequence and we can kind of hear our handiwork so far. Cool, so let's hear from the beginning what we've got so far. Cool, so I mean I think that kind of demonstrates for the most part what you can get out of this. Just one more thing I will add, just while we are here. Something that you'll find infinitely useful to kind of tie things together is adding in a little bit of reverb. This is something that I think we often overdo when we first get started, but once you add it in, it can really kind of help glue things all together, or really make it feel, instead of being individual discrete sounds, it can kind of make them feel more like it's in an environment together. So I'm not going to go too much into the actual making of reverbs. That can, you can spend hours getting lost on that. Effects, reverb. I'm just going to select this preset. What's that? Sweet Verbo. Okay, cool. So not doing anything by itself. If we were to drag some type of sound over onto it, that looks super loud. Quite a lot of reverb without. Oops, sorry, without. Let's maybe put it somewhere else. Not reverb. With. So that sounds cool. What I would suggest, rather than taking all the sounds that you want to be sent to the reverb, or all the sounds that you want reverberation on, rather than putting them on the track themselves, what you could do is, so let's say this is your rocks track. What you can do is you can, from your routing, select, receives, track 22 rocks, and it's going to receive the sound from there, and that way you can kind of instead of having to change the volume of all the individual clips, you can essentially, let's say you want, sorry, my brain is shutting down. So essentially what you can do, what it's doing here is that it's sending a copy of this signal of rocks into the reverb channel. Want more reverb, then instead of having to change the volume of the rocks itself, you could increase the volume of the reverb, or decrease it. Basically just allows you to play a bit more with that.
So could you make the reverb channel just receive like from a whole bunch of channels and then just be the only reverb channel dealing with audio for like a whole bunch of things?
Definitely. If you wanted, you can in fact set up two different reverbs. So you could have one being a room reverb, you could have one being a kind of hall or cavern reverb, and then you could on your hall reverb you receive from rocks, or what might be easier is on each of the tracks that you want to go to reverb, you select send to reverb. Okay, it's already selected here. Let's say lava also wants, oh, here we go, background, what's here? Okay, whichever sound it is, you also want these, what are these, sizzles? If you also want those to get sent to the reverb channel, right click on root, send, reverb. I'm not sure if you can really hear in that particular scenario, but then both of those are getting sent to the reverb channel. Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's neat. Groovy.
Right,
Right, so
question. Sorry.
Yes.
Does that reverb track play a copy of the rocks falling, or purely the reverb portion of it?
So essentially, what's happening in terms of the signal flow is so these rocks are playing at whatever volume I've set to come out of this specific rock track or rocks track, and then that it's sending essentially a split of that signal to the reverb track, and then playing out whatever signal has come into it. It's being processed by this effects processor.
Okay, so that still has the actual rock sound in it, as though you were playing it twice, or is it like a proportional thing, like 50-50?
So, I mean, I think in terms of digital audio, it comes through, you can set the level, I think you can actually set the level of your sends here, adjust IO parameters. So you can also select how much you want to, so here we go, routing for tracks 22, send to track 21, you can select how much of it you want to send. So for example, that will give you more control. Let's say you do want to have quite loud reverb, but you don't want your rocks to be sent too loud through there. Then you could reduce the amount of signal or the level of the signal that's being sent from this track to your reverb track. And perhaps for one of your other sounds, you might want a higher level to be sent through to your reverb track. So it also allows you a lot of control in that sense.
That's cool.
Cool. Nice. So I think let's finish up in Reaper, and I just want to sorry, let me just reply to this message. I think we're pretty good with that. So let me just hop over to our PowerPoint. Right. So I think we've just passed 2 hours. We don't have really too much more content to go through. Is everyone okay to hold on for now, or to finish up? Are we good? Okay, groovy, nice. Right, so essentially we covered footsteps. Sorry, I was actually meant to go through this before we created our stuff. But in the creation process, kind of before I actually begin the actual layering and editing and what have you of sounds, usually what I'll try and do is I'll try and think of the layers within that sound. So for footsteps, it would be, there's going to be a leather sole and some type of stone crunch. That allows me to more easily go through my sounds and kind of start pre-preparing them. For the jump sounds, recording, so perhaps you might want to add in some reverb, attacking, some swing sounds, grunts, impacts, death sounds. So I think, for example, you could make just your regular death sound, and then another one where he or she falls into the lava. It's really up to you as to how many levels you want to put into there. We covered some bubbling lava. We didn't in this particular instance put in any chains. There are some in the project that I'll be sharing after this. And then, perhaps with your reward, at the end of the level, you want to have, I don't know, some type of choir, and some big sweep. Coins always go really well. It's kind of, I think there's this link in our minds of like, yeah, got the money, whenever you come out at the end of the level or something like that. Rayman Legends is really good at, one of the many games that's really good at really building up those rewards. So we've got our contents. We spoke a little bit about perhaps rendering files out in place using the right-click render item or right-click glue. However, there is another option of actually bouncing your files out. Essentially, what you do is you select your timeline. I should have actually done this in the project. Essentially, there are a number of different approaches you can do. You can choose. Oh, sorry, have I shared the right? Yeah, okay, you are in this. So, for example, one of the things you could do when bouncing out your files is you might decide that you want to bounce out all of your ambience. So in that case, I would mute all of these other channels, create a send to a new track, ambience stem, receive from folder background, receive from folder lava, and from there, when I record in, oh sorry, you got a arm for recording. Turn this guy off. Okay. Sorry, one moment. Why am I receiving my voice? Input none. So essentially you can see your levels that are coming through here. I've selected receive on the lava background. I've record armed the track. And from here, except it's not recording. Sorry, some technical issues. Okay, sorry, you'll have to excuse me for that. Okay, so if we're not working in that sense, essentially another output that you can do is you can select the timeline that you want to render out, click render, and from there you output all the details of the files. So for example, this would be ambience. It'll record to this folder, render out one file, and it'll go through and render your ambience. So doing so, essentially you'd be bouncing your files for, it can be a bit of a monotonous process if you have many different files, but once you get the kind of flow of it down, then you essentially bounce out each of your individual files. One thing I find that is quite important is making sure that you have a naming convention, and then that you have some type of a decent file structure. It's very easy once you have all of these files all over the place to start getting lost with what's this and what's that. Hand over to your programmer, okay, but what's this thing about, sizzle underscore x06 final number 6, definitely last bounce, never again. So I think definitely sticking to some type of a naming convention and a file structure. What I found worked quite well was to bounce all the files out into a folder and literally just replace them as I did revisions, and then just copy the whole file over, or give the whole file over to the programmer who I was working with, Ash at the time, and then he would basically just replace the folder, and that would mean not having to re-link each of the files once you get back into Unity or whatever game engine you're using. File format, a few different formats you can use. I think that it really just comes down to size versus quality. Excuse me. WAV files are going to be great quality, also really, really big files, a few minutes, and then you're already at 50, 60 megs. OGG is what I converted a number of the different files we used in this project to. That's a fairly good trade-off between size and quality. And then MP3, great for size. Quality you might find, depending on your settings, it'll really start breaking down once you reach lower settings, and you'll start hearing a lot of artifacts, a lot of a lot of little things going on there. I've got a question here. What about FLAC? FLAC is great. It's basically a lossless format, so you don't lose. Talking about lossy and lossless formats, essentially MP3 is a lossy format, so you lose a lot of data within the audio. However, that saves space. FLAC doesn't. You don't lose any of the audio quality, but again, very big files. Also, FLAC I find a lot of the time is not supported. Some players like VLC player, for example, work great with it. If you have FLAC recordings, really, really nice, especially for orchestras or something like that, where you need a huge dynamic range, but definitely takes up a lot of space. So I would suggest, if you're working on a small game, just sticking to OGG for now. Cool. So I showed a little bit more about that solo and muting function as you're rendering files out. If you have a really long recording and you realize halfway through that you've muted one of your tracks and your essential tracks, that's super infuriating. So yeah, or sometimes you might render something out and it's completely silent, and so yeah, just make sure that you check before you render files out that you've either routed things correctly, that nothing is soloed, or specifically the things that you do want soloed are soloed or not muted. Implementation we've spoken a bit about. I mentioned using direct implementation, where you essentially from within your game engine, you link directly to files. So you might link your events directly to play this file. Again, middleware, we spoke a little bit about using Wise. We didn't speak that much about Fmod, but Fmod and Wise are pretty much the two main candidates at this point. I think it really depends on what project, what your project needs are. Generally, I see that there's a bit more support for using middleware like Wise. Again, they also have free courses that you can do online. So if you are interested in taking the sound to, kind of a bit, a higher level, and you want to have more control over randomizing things like your heel must play one of these 16 files, and then the middle of the foot must play one of these 16 files, and the toe must play one of these 16 files, and then you want to make each one have a pitch variation, and There's a lot of really, really, really cool stuff that you can do with Wise. In terms of working on sound as part of a team, I think I'm probably not the most qualified to speak about this, because I haven't really worked on that many games, but I can say understanding the pipeline, kind of understanding what's going to be happening, or just knowing that perhaps at the beginning of your game jam, everyone might be going around doing their stuff. I remember last year, I kind of felt like almost for the first entire day, I didn't really have anything to show. And at some point I started panicking. This game's halfway done. I don't have anything to show. So understanding that, I think once I understood that sound is something that kind of a lot of the time gets put in not right at the beginning, but kind of closer to the end. Again, if your 3D modeler comes up with something and then adds something else, then you might decide to change the sound somewhat from then on. So just focusing really on the groundwork, making sure you got that organization right, you have a palette of sounds. From there, you can start then kind of piecing things together as it goes along. And then, yeah, of course, you might end up scrapping a lot of the work that's fine. If you've worked on it, then you're welcome to reuse it for another project later. So yeah, that's the main thing, but I think more important than any of that is really enjoy yourself. I know within sound, my experience has been that some people get super hyper critical about it. If you go on some forums, that's not the right way to do it, the compressor settings are not good enough, and it's clipping and blah blah. I think at the end of the day, if it sounds good, that's what matters the most. And there'll always be people who are elitist and purist about what sound's meant to be like, and yeah, it does make sense that it should sound good, but yeah, that's the main thing. I think enjoy yourself. I've put a couple of links in here. I'll share this PDF afterwards, or I'll share this PowerPoint afterwards. A couple of artists who are quite involved in sound have some really great videos. I must say I do have one selfless promotion there. Shameless promotion. And there for myself, Magwaza Audio. If you want to shoot me any questions, then I'm happy to. I'll stick around for a bit now as well, but I'm also happy for if you'd like to send me an email later, or I don't know, if there's anything I can help with, then I'm happy to do that, as well as a couple of resources here, which I mentioned earlier: Freesound, Sonus.com, so on and so forth. Cool. So thank you. Do you have any questions at this point?
Just to confirm, you suggest that that you essentially put all of your work into a single project, rather than say make a project per sound you're trying to make, and then you just render out certain portions of it.
I think that does make it a lot easier for a number of reasons. Firstly, because it'll be easy to reference other sound in your project. You might work in blocks. Here's the background ambience. Here are my attack sounds. Here are my monster sounds. That sounds cool. If it's in separate projects, then you'll find yourself having to render out, switch to another project, import those files, compare them. You might say, oh, actually, those two sounds are clashing a bit. Let me close this session, go back into the other session, reopen it up, change the EQ. So I would suggest for most things, pretty much just working in a single project and bouncing out from there. Yes.
Cool. Thanks.
Cool. No, welcome. Also, if you'd prefer not to speak, but you just want to type a little message in here, I'm also happy to read out any questions you have.
This isn't really a question, but just thank you for hosting this. I think this sort of workshop events are awesome, and it's a lot easier, at least for me, to learn something this way than it is to forcing myself to follow a 1-hour YouTube tutorial. So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
I'm glad. And thank you again to Free Lives, Make Games SA, making this happen. I'm glad I could help. I know when I first became involved in the community. So I mean, this year, to be honest, I haven't really been that, as involved as I'd like to be. It's been a crazy year for everyone. And I moved away from Cape Town. But last year, when I first joined the community, it really, honestly, I felt like everyone was super welcoming and just made me feel I don't know. For me, it's doing stuff like this is incredibly anxiety provoking. So it's kind of the thing of, going somewhere, meeting people that you've never met before who are involved in something highly technical. It can be quite nerve-wracking, but then I think to just be able to learn from each other and just remember that everyone started somewhere, and it's not just that everyone starts somewhere, but that everyone has something to contribute, even if you feel like you don't have any technical skills or you don't have anything specific. Just by you being you, you have something to offer, your unique perspective, your unique ideas. So yeah, I'm glad that I could contribute in whatever way possible.
So aside from your shameless self-plug, are there any other projects that you've done where we can see your work and such?
So I actually just put my site together recently. So I put my latest showreel on there. I think there's not. I think I have links to some of my content, or rather, I've referenced some of the content. I need to actually put links up there, so you can listen to the actual audio. So I've got one showreel up there for now. Previously, a lot of the stuff that I did was actually through the college where I studied my diploma, Cape Audio College. And
hey. Capetonians Unite.
Yay! Well, I'm actually from Pietermaritzburg. I will say
Damn it!
Maritzburg. But yeah, and then I was part of a team, Team 7. We joined SA Game Jam last year, and we had a game, Midnight Auto Supply, which you're welcome to check out as well. Yeah. Cool. Nice. So, if there are English, it's falling apart. If there aren't any other questions or comments or anything that anyone wants to share, then I'm happy to sign off. I'll also still be within the Make Games SA Discord channel. Any questions you have, you're also welcome to share on there. I'm also happy to reply privately, but I think it would also be good to, for everyone else to also be able to be involved in the discussion.
I was wondering, do you have any tips for voice acting?
If you didn't gather, I'm a terrible voice actor.
Damn it, I need... Because the thing is, when I was younger, aside from designing games, I wanted to do voice acting. So I thought if there were any tips or tricks you could have given.
I think a lot of the time less is more. I think when I first came to it, I'd be like, oh, okay, so it's I'm gonna talk like this, or take it way over the top. Hey man, what?
Yes, the anime voice acting.
Too much, So really, just I find a lot of the time toning it down, and trying to just believe someone. Think of someone who's actually believable. Cheers, Andrew. So rather than trying to make someone completely over the top, kind of maybe just tone them down a couple of steps and think okay, well, what does this person actually sound like? What is their background? What is their, what makes them tick? So really, the more believable you can make the character, the more well-rounded and the better you can describe your character. And I think that goes for anything, whether it's from, fictional writing or whether that's, designing your character.
I remember something similar from drama when I was doing it in high school.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think that's the one thing I would suggest is to just kind of bring it down, but also try and keep it believable. Yeah.
And I guess if you do need voice actors, could I maybe kind of try just so I can kind of get some experience?
I'm happy to do that. Definitely. Yeah. I think it's not just myself. I think there's probably many people who are happy to connect and link up and be able to use each other for experience and for practice projects. And I think that's kind of also part of the ethos behind game jams, is to get out and connect with other people. There's a whole community here. Sometimes it might feel like, where am I going to find someone to be able to do this? But I think by remaining involved in the community and connecting with other people, there's it's a way for us to all help each other kind of realize this goal, this reality.
Cool. So must I give my email, or must I just find you on Discord or something? Or
sure, I can send you my details now. Let me actually just Or okay, so I have put my link to my website there. If anyone does want to reach out, I'll also send you a message now directly with my details. Anyone else who wants to get hold of me or wants to collaborate on something or thinks there's anything that I can help with, then you're also welcome to reach out via any of the channels, either Discord. I'm also in the Make Games SA Discord channel, or via the website is cool. Nice. Cool. So thank you all. Much appreciated. I hope that
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope that I don't know, made put some ideas somewhere in there, or kind of helped clear up any any fuzzy points, or hopefully, I don't know, maybe help you overcome any fear if there was any of working with audio or getting involved with games. Go out there, have fun, enjoy yourselves.
Thanks, Simon.
Cool, you're welcome.
Thanks so much again.
Thanks a lot.
Cool, thanks guys.
Cheers.
That was
Bye.
awesome.